Helen always considered herself a smart woman. She didn't spend too much, always saved for the future and dreamed of a quiet old age. She believed in her children. She believed that they were decent, that they appreciated her sacrifices. But life cruelly showed her that she was wrong. The morning sun shone softly through the curtains as Helen sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. It was an ordinary day until she picked up an envelope lying among the mail. It bore the bank's logo. What more do they want? I've already paid everything off, she thought as she tore the envelope open. Inside was a short message that made her heart sinking. Your account is empty. Your $120,000 mortgage on your home is in arrears. If the debt is not repaid within 30 days, the property is subject to foreclosure. Her fingers trembled. What does this mean? She whispered, rereading every word. She hadn't taken out a mortgage. She hadn't touched her retirement money. Helen rushed to her computer, opened her online banking, and nearly fainted. The amount she had been saving for retirement was gone. Tens of thousands of dollars had been transferred to her oldest son's account. A few thousand more were transferred to her daughter's card. Her breathing became ragged. This can't be true. She grabbed the phone and dialed her son's number with trembling fingers. The ring seemed endless. When he finally answered, his voice was sleepy, indifferent. Mom, what's wrong? What happened? Helen's voice broke. You took my money, all my savings. How could you? There was silence on the other end of the line. Mom. Calm down. It's not quite what you think. How else can I explain it? Her hands were trembling, and she could feel the ground parting beneath her. Her own children, her own blood, the people she loved most. They had betrayed her. Was it possible to foresee such a betrayal? Helen had always been sure that family was the most important thing. She raised her children in love, taught them honesty, self-respect, and care for their loved ones. But now she was sitting at her kitchen table, clutching her bank statement, and realizing that the people she loved the most had shattered her life. Helen had always been a responsible woman. She had worked as an accountant for over 30 years, not allowing herself to waste money. All her thoughts were only about her children, Michael and Sarah. Her husband died when the children were 10 and 7 years old. She worked 2 shifts and saved every dollar. She didn't buy new clothes, didn't go on vacations, didn't afford expensive things. She saved not only on herself, but also on everything that could wait. Her only dream ways: to give children an education, to help them get on their feet, to ensure a decent old age for herself. But it turned out that her donations were in vain. Michael has always been ambitious. He wanted to become a lawyer and prove to the world that he deserved a better life. Helen believed in him and paid for his education at a prestigious college. When he received his diploma, she cried with happiness, thinking that her sacrifices were not in vain. But something went wrong. After college, he took out loans to start his own company. The business didn't take off, and he was mired in debt. To fix the situation, he borrowed money again, thinking he could pay it off. Helen didn't know about this. Sarah was different. She didn't want a career. She wanted to live a good life without much effort. She wanted stylish clothes, expensive accessories, and vacations at resorts. She believed that she would be lucky in life, that everything would somehow work itself out. She often asked Helen for money, and her mother could not refuse her. When Sarah got married, she told her mother, "Mom, you know how hard it is for a young family. Will you help me with the down payment on a house?" Helen gave $10,000 from her savings. But it was not enough. Helen did not know that her children were in serious financial trouble. She didn't realize that Michael was in debt like silk, and Sarah was spending money uncontrollably. They knew that their mother had a retirement account, and they knew how to access it. And they decided that this money belonged to them. Helen believed all her life that she was raising honest, good children. But she was wrong. And when Helen saw that all her savings were gone, her first thought was, "This is a mistake." She refused to believe that her children could do such a thing. But the more she searched for answers, the more frightening the truth became. Helen sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her bank statement. The numbers didn't lie. $10,000 had been transferred to Michael's account. $5,000 went to Sarah's account, and another $2,000 was spent on online stores that Helen had never visited. She felt her heart clench in her chest. How could this have happened? Why didn't they tell me? She dialed the bank's number. Hello? I'd like to report a fraud. Her voice was trembling. The operator listened to her carefully and then asked Ms. Helen, "Have you given anyone access to your account?" She stammered. Last year, Michael had asked her for her social security number and signature on some documents. "It's for the tax reports, Mom," he said. She didn't hesitate then. He was her son. He couldn't hurt her. The next morning, Helen decided to talk to Michael. She dialed his number, but he didn't answer. A few minutes later, she received a message. "Mom, I'm busy right now. I'll call you back later." She knew the tone of voice. He was evasive. Then she called, "Sarah, Mom!" Her daughter picked the phone, her voice joyful. "Sarah, I want to ask you about my savings. Did you and Michael take it out?" There was silence. For the first time, Helen heard real tension in her voice. "Mom, it's not quite you think." "How?" Helen's voice became harsh. Sarah siding, "Let's talk when we meet." Helen realized she was hiding something. That evening, Helen invited the children over. Michael came dressed in an expensive suit, although he said he was having financial difficulties. Sarah was distant, as if she knew there would be a fight. She sat down in front of them and put a bank statement on the table. Can you explain this?" Michael exchanged a quick glance with his sister. "Mom, you know we wouldn't take your money for no reason," he began. "Then explain why you have my $10,000 in your account." Sarah nervously rubbed her napkin. They were not prepared for her to find out the truth. "It's only temporary. We'll get it back soon," she mumbled. Helen felt herself become enraged. Her own children had lied to her. As it turned out that Michael had taken the money to close an old business debt. Sarah had used her share for a trip and gifts for her husband. They didn't even ask her permission. Helen no longer recognized her children. Do you realize that this was my pension money? What am I supposed to do now?" Michael shrugged his shoulders. "We didn't think you would react like this." Helen felt her life was shattered. And the worst part was that this was only the beginning. Helen stood by the window, clutching the documents she had just received from the bank. The truth she had been afraid to hear was right in front of her, in black and white. Her children hadn't just used her money. They had lied, they had betrayed her. In the morning, Helen went to the bank, hoping to get an explanation. Are you sure no one else has accessed the account?" The bank manager flipped through the documents. Yes. I have always controlled my finances myself." Helen wringed her hands, but he put the sheets in front of her. The signature authorizing the transfers was hers. Access to the account had been added from Michael's email. The money started disappearing almost a year ago in small amounts that gradually increased. "It's impossible," she whispered. But inside she knew it was possible. Helen returned home, her heart pounding in her chest. She spread the documents on the table and stared at the familiar signature. They used me. But how? And then it hit her. Enema Michael had asked her several times to sign some ordinary papers. For the tax office. She trusted him. She didn't read what she was signing. He knew she wouldn't check. Her children slipped her an authorization to access the account. Helen couldn't wait any longer. She dialed Sarah's number. We need to talk. Now? An hour later, both of her children were sitting in her living room. There were documents on the table in front of them. Can you explain this to me? Sarah looked at the floor. Michael sighed nervously. Mom, you don't have to be dramatic. Helen's breath caught in her throat. Dramatize. Her voice trembled. You deceived me, you used me. And now you're telling me it's nothing. Michael rubbed his face. It's not that simple. We didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't. You knew I've been saving this money my whole life. I trusted you. For the first time in many years, Helen realized that she no longer knew who her children had become. And worse, maybe they had always been like that. Helen sat in her living room, clutching the documents that confirmed the deception. Her children, Michael and Sarah, stood in front of her. She looked at their faces, trying to find even a hint of remorse. But there was none. How could you? Her voice trembled, but she held on. Sarah looked away, and Michael siding. Mom, we didn't want you to find out like this. You stole my money. They were silent. I trusted you. Helen looked at her son. Michael, I signed the papers because I thought it was just a formality. It was a formality, he mumbled. But the situation got out of hand. Helen felt herself getting angry. Do you realize that I'm left with nothing? Sarah looked up to Mom. You're being dramatic. It was just money. It was just money. Just money. It was my savings for my old age. For the life I planned. Michael crossed his arms. We thought it was temporary. That it would come back. But it didn't, did it? Silence. So what did you spend my money on? Helen gave them a cold look, and Sarah bit her lip nervously, and Michael mumbled, We invested. Helen felt dizzy. You put my safety at stake. My future. We were trying to help. Sarah blurted out, Help! Helen could not stand it and slammed her fist on the table. The children were silent. I don't know who you have become anymore. Tears came to her eyes, but she held them back. And Helen got up from her chair and looked at them. I gave you everything. And this is how you have repaid me. Michael looked at her guiltily. We can fix this somehow. How? Will you give me back the years I've spent saving? Helen, no one said anything. Helen realized that at that moment something in her changed forever. She could no longer trust them. Helen no longer recognized her own children. She hoped to hear remorse, to see repentance, but instead she received indifference and excuses. But the biggest blow was yet to come. In the evening, when Helen was alone, she looked at her bank statements again. Dates, amounts, purposes of payments. Something was bothering her, and then she saw it. Transfers to an unknown account that had been repeated for months. What kind of account is this? She whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. Before. Helen had believed that her children had simply made a mistake, but now. This was planned. The next day, she called Michael and Sarah into her office. You haven't told me everything, she said coldly. Michael shrugged his shoulders. We already told you that we wanted to return the money. Don't lie to me. Her voice trembled, but she kept her temper in check. I know you didn't just put that money into some investment. Sarah started to type nervously on her phone, but Helen interrupted her. You've been transferring money to a third-party account for years. Whose account is it? Silence. A long, unbearable silence. It's not what you think, Michael said. Then explain it. Sarah was the first to break down. Okay. Yes, we took money, but it wasn't just for us. Who was it for then? Oh, Adam, Michael answered, not looking his mother in the eye for Jack. Helen suddenly felt the world around her begin to dim. Jack? Her late husband had a younger brother, an incorrigible gambler who, even when Jack was alive, was always asking them for money. You gave my money to Jack. Sarah sobbed. He promised he would pay me back. He said it was only temporary. Temporary. Helen clenched her fists. You knowingly fight a con man. He's our uncle. So what? She could not listen to them any longer. Helen rose from her chair, feeling her insides boiling. You didn't just use me. You gave my future to a man who never cared about our family. Michael bowed his head. We wanted to help. No, Helen said coldly. You wanted to be heroes by spending money that wasn't yours. The tears were no longer flowing. She was too angry, too broken. Get out of here. Sarah looked up. Mom. Get out! The door closed, leaving Helen alone. Now she knew the truth, and this truth only made her feel worse. Helen sat in her empty house, staring at the wall as if it might hold an answer. Her children, her hope for the future, had betrayed her trust. She had lost her savings. But worse, she had lost faith in those she loved most. She stayed up all night. Thoughts raced through her mind, each more bitter than the last. How could they do this to me? Didn't I give them everything? Didn't I sacrifice myself for them? She remembered when Michael would fall off his bike as a child, and she would pick him up, calming him down. How Sarah was afraid of the dark, and Helen would sit by her bedside for hours. And now they left her with nothing. Suddenly her eyes fell on an old family photo. She picked it up and looked at the young faces of her children. They had once been her pride. Now they were her biggest disappointment. The next day, Helen decided to meet them again. She invited Michael and Sarah to the cafe where they used to celebrate their birthdays. They came, but there was no remorse in their eyes, only tension and irritation. Mom, let's not have any drama, Michael said immediately. Helen gritted her teeth. No drama? You stole my future and I have no right to be upset. We just wanted to help. Sarah began. Help who? Yourself. Or your lazy uncle. Michael looked at his sister nervously. We can work this out somehow. It's too late, Helen said coldly. I have only one question. Did you really think I would never find out? Silence. I don't believe you anymore, she finally said. After that conversation, Helen went to the bank. She closed all joint accounts, changed card access, and took out a legal injunction against any financial transactions on behalf of her children. She also contacted a lawyer. Are you sure? He asked. Absolutely, she said firmly. She changed her will. Her children would not receive another cent. She went to Sarah and Michael's house again. When they opened the door, she said simply, "It's over." What do you mean? Michael went cold. You are no longer my family. Sarah cried, but Helen didn't budge. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. She walked away without even looking back. Helen left the city. She moved to a small house on the outskirts, started volunteering at the local senior center. She found new friends, people who respected her. And although the pain of betrayal will never go away, she will no longer allow anyone to control her life. For the first time in years, she felt free. Helen sat on the terrace of her new home, breathing in the fresh air. The sun was slowly setting over the horizon, painting the sky in golden hues. She was alone. But did that mean she was alone? Several months passed after she made her decision. She no longer spoke to her children. And although her heart still ached with pain, she no longer felt like a victim. The move gave her the opportunity to start over. She found a small community of older people who supported each other. At the local library, she ran a book club where people discussed books and shared stories. She didn't have much money, but she had something more important: peace of mind. One day, she accidentally found an old photo album, and as she looked at the pictures of her children for a long time, small, smiling, carefree, there was no more anger in her eyes. Only a sad realization she could no longer change the past. But can she let it go? On one morning, as Helen was making coffee, her phone vibrated. A message from Sarah. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I know we did a terrible thing. Is there any chance we can talk?" Helen stared at the screen for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Did she want to open that door again? Could she trust those who had betrayed her again? She took a deep breath and deleted the message. In the evening, she went for a walk. She no longer felt lost. For the first time in a long time, she realized that her future depended on her. She did not know what would happen next, but this time she was not afraid.